This is Evan Abrams, and today in After Effects we're going to make this really cool card stack that looks like kind of a stop motion-y thing. It's totally ripped off of an artist who did it physically by hand, and I thought it was really impressive how he printed everything out and then created all these layers and then just photographed them one on top of each other, creating stop motion animation and really playing with positive and negative space in interesting ways. So basically, we're just going to make some simple animation that's going to be black and white, filling out the positive and negative zones, and then, we can animate some simple geometry, or really you can get as complex as you want, like this flying through space nonsense, but it makes really interesting motion trails behind things, and I find the texture quite nice, and you can even put in some expressions to help you control the offset. So hopefully it all works out, and we'll make something that actually looks nice and you enjoy looking at it. Hopefully you enjoy looking at this tutorial. I don't particularly enjoy looking at it, but that's because I had to make it. But, that's neither here nor there. So let's get into After Effects and try to make something interesting. So inside of After Effects, the first thing I'm going to do is make a new composition and make it only as long, I suppose, as you really need it to be. So we're going to go HDTV 1080-25, and we're going to go for about 10 seconds. So it doesn't have to be crazy long, and for our purposes, we don't want it to be because that's a lot of work. But the first step is you want to make a clean animation. So let's just rename this to be clean animation. In this comp, all we're going to do is animate things in black and white, making positive and negative space. So we're going to do things like add a new solid, make it black. Okay, that'll be our background. And then create a new solid, and then we can make it white. And then we're going to use this to create a frame. So select it, put a mask on there, and then take that mask and bring in its expansion in a little bit, and then change it from add to subtract, so we have a nice frame on there. And what we can do is we can even just animate this to be kind of like our opening. So we'll have it open with just animate the mask expansion from far too much to just enough. The next thing we'll do is we can maybe bring in a circle, so just get the ellipse tool, create that, and just make sure you're only working with black and white things, just so you don't become confused with what you're doing. Not that I think you'll get confused, but sometimes you do. Take the ellipse path, we'll just make this into a circle. This animation part, don't think too much of it. This isn't the core of what we're doing. All the effect comes in later, but right now the important thing is to make sure everything that you're making is either white or black, and keep in mind that all of the black space will become like a tunnel towards the back of the stack of cards. So we're going to animate its position. So just put a keyframe, maybe we'll have it come in and then just kind of move around a little bit for our amusement. Not totally sure what to do with it, but there's got to be something. But anyway, so you've got this thing that comes in. Maybe we can make that look a little bit more lively by taking all of these keyframes and just giving them our classic little treatment there. Whoosh. So that'll be good enough. Change the scaling. So scale it down, scale it up, that kind of thing. And then we can, play around and create some other circles that are going to be black so that they punch holes in things. So let's make sure this is a circle as well. And then play around with its scale value here. Boop. So that's going to make a big hole in stuff. And let's make sure that our frame is on top of everything. Boop. So it's making a big hole in things, and we don't have that much time to work with, so I don't feel obligated to animate a lot of stuff. So I think this will be good for what we have going on. Maybe end the way we came in, so it creates a nice loop, just like that. Okay, so this is our clean animation, and whenever you want to make changes to the animation that's happening, you want to come into the clean animation and make your changes there. So now we're going to take that clean animation, drag it out, and make a new composition so that it will form the basis of adding some paper. So instead of clean animation 2, we'll call it plus paper, so we know that we're adding the paper texture to this, which means we need to import a paper texture. Select a paper texture you like. If you want to use some of my textures, there's a texture pack you can download and enjoy, but we're going to use this old paper texture, so drag that out. Now the first thing that we need to do is we're going to set the clean animation to, instead of being normal, we're going to go with Stencil Luma, so that the black is cutting a big hole in things, and the only thing that remains is the outline made up of paper, because it's like it's cutting a hole in the paper. So the next thing to do is to get your paper doing things that you want. So first thing to do is scale it and position it as you see fit. This looks pretty good. We can see a lot of the texture there. And then we're going to apply a tint to it just to take away its color information. We're going to apply a brightness and contrast. We're going to go with something like 65 and -50 there, so that'll do. We're going to use a curves to just bring out some more of that contrastiness, so we're going to just give it a bit of a contrast curve there. And now one of the things that's going to drive this animation is that we want every frame of this to look like a unique piece of paper. And to do that with only one paper texture, we are going to mess around with its rotation. So alt click on the rotation, and we are going to mess around with its position. So alt click on the position stopwatch. Hit U to bring up those things. The position, we are just going to do a simple wiggle, 25 frames a second, and move around 250. So every frame, it's going to be in a new position. So as you can see, it's already creating some variance for us like that. We can copy that expression, move it down to the rotation, and just change the value there from 250 to say 10. So that it is moving around and wiggling and changing, so it looks like it could be a new piece of paper on every go. Now we need to make the clean animation different on every frame, so it looks like we drew and cut out on every frame, and it'll be slightly different on each. So this is a little bit more complicated. Certainly we're going to use the position, and we'll apply a wiggle 25 times a second 4 to that, so it's going to be jostling around a little bit. And then we're also going to deal with its scale, since that's going to push it out from the bounds of this thing a little bit. So jack that up to 102, just so when it wiggles it's not getting too far. And then its rotation, we're again going to wiggle 25 times a second, and then only 0.25. So as you can see, it's lightly jostling around a bit, so that's good. Now the next thing we need to do is mess with a little bit of these lines, because I don't really care for how they look. You know, they're too straight, they're too perfect, and I know for a fact I cannot cut things out that well. So I'm going to use a turbulent displace on that, which as you can see makes things kind of gross looking, but with a little bit of a tweak we can get this going. So change the amount down to like 5, so it's not that much. Change the size down to 25, so it's just going to be a nice subtle change in the edges. So you can see it most on straight sections, but you get the idea that it looks slightly imperfect. And these values will change depending on how big your composition is. This works for the size of composition this is. Now the next thing is evolution options, and change the random seed. Hold down Alt and click on that, and we are going to go with a random number between 1 and 100, which changes and gives it a new number every frame. So that's what the random does. So you've got 1 to 100, it's going to be a new random seed between 1 and 100. You can really use whatever there, but that just keeps it changing every frame. So what we've got is we have the clean animation, we've given it some texture, and we've got it kind of waving around like each frame might have been uniquely drawn. So now we're going to get into basically the heart of this thing, the really you know, what makes it into that big tunnely effect that we did, and it's gonna get off the rails starting now. So if you need to go get a sandwich before we go on this journey, you want to take a pee break, now's the time to do it, because this car doesn't stop till we reach Manitoba. So take plus paper and move it on to a new composition, and we're going to rename plus paper here in the layer stack. We're going to rename it lead layer. Good, because this is going to be the lead layer from which all of the other layers will take their cues from. So this one's going to be the top. It's going to be the top dog, top banana, top whatever. This will drive everything below it. Got to do this one right. So the first thing to do is we're going to go layer styles, add a drop shadow on here, and that drop shadow, we just need the opacity to be 5%. Let's go distance of 2, size of 3. Good. This will put a little shadow between all of the layers, which will be helpful to keep them separate. Now the other thing we need to do to keep them separate is to give them a tint that gets darker as it goes back. I'm going to apply tint to this layer, and I'm going to add an expression to the map white to value. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference what index number, so which layer number it is, and that'll determine how white or dark this is. And that expression looks something like this. So we go x equals, and then we're going to make a linear expression, linear, which is going to remap values, and the values we're going to reference are the index values, and the values are going to range from 1 to however many layers are in this comp, and the computer already knows that, so we can just type in this capital COMP dot num layers with an S, and then comma 1 comma 0. So basically we're going to take the index numbers, that's what we're looking at, and we're going to go from 1 being the lowest to this comp num layers being the most, and they'll remap that from 1 to 0. So that's good. And then we will take that x value and we will turn it into a color by going x comma x comma x comma x. So at its brightest it's going to be 1s across the board, at its darkest it's going to be 0s across the board. Hit return, and it's going to tell me that I did this wrong, but that's only because I missed a semicolon. So always remember your semicolons and you won't have a problem. So that's good. The last thing to do is to go layer time, enable time remapping, and we're not going to remap any of the time, but we need to convert this thing's time values into something that other layers can reference. So just in case you do come back and want a time remap or whatever, this will help us have other layers reference this layer's time. So it might happen that you need to alter the timing of things, but just keep in mind this is one method to mess around with time. Another is to just remap everything to global time, but I don't want to run the risk that I might want to change where this layer is, you know, in time, and then have everything else not update correctly. So time remap on. Let's just go through everything we've changed. Hit UU to see all your changes. We have a layer style on here. We have a tint with this x equals linear index 1, this comp num layers 1 comma 0, semicolon at the end, and then a row of x's in square brackets, making it the whitest layer. And then we have the time remap on. So that's layer number 1. Now we're going to duplicate that layer, and we're going to call this copy layer, and as you can see this layer has to go below the lead layer, so make sure copy layers are all under the lead layers. And there's going to be more things that we change about the copy layer that we didn't do to the lead layer, but first we need to make a new null object, and this null object is going to be the control layer. And you can see just by adding this layer above, it's changed the colors of all the layers below. So that's that tint expression working. Put it below everything. And now we're going to make a new solid, make it a black solid, or you can reuse the black solid from before and put it at the bottom as well. So that the bottom is always going to be black, just to make everything simple for you. So the next thing to do is go into the control layer, and we're going to add a couple of controls. We need a point control, And the other thing you're going to need is a slider control right there. And these two are going to change the distance offset, and they will also change the time offset. So we'll be able to use these to change how far distance-wise layers are from each other, and also how far in time they are from each other. And just set the point here to be at 0, 0, because we really only need it for its array properties to be able to move it 0, 0 to whatever, or negative whatever to whatever. So this is an array of values 2, and this is an array of values 1, just because we need a 2 and a 1. Anyway, that's not important. Let's get into the copy layer and make it do something. One of the things that's going to be different is we need to alter the scale of this thing. So the scale, hold down Alt and give it a new expression, and that is going to be, first off, set up a variable of x equals 100, subtract, and then in brackets index minus 1, semicolon at the end, give it its final value of x comma x. And what this does is it makes every layer below slightly smaller than the layer above it by 1%, because it's taking the index value, which is 2, minus 1, which makes it 1, and then subtracting it from 100, so it's 99. Then the next layer below it will be 98, and so on. So that is scale that will constantly get smaller as it goes back, because we're kind of faking in 3D that things are getting smaller as it moves back. Now the next thing to do is mess around with the position, and the position is going to be tied into this control layer's distance offset, which will allow us to manipulate how that stack is relating and stacking to other things. So let's just go ahead and lock this control panel up here. All those values we can get at them. Hold down Alt, click on the position of the copy layer, and we're going to say value, so whatever value this is, and then plus, and then in brackets, and it's going to be plus the distance offset here multiplied by the index minus 1. We're taking this value, which I guess at this point is 0, 0, and we're multiplying it by index minus 1, so 2 minus 1 equals 1, just so that as you offset them, they all offset relative to each other as well. So hit enter, and that's good. So now you're able to do a distance offset by scrubbing that along. Congratulations, that's another part of this equation done. And now the big one is going to be the time remap. Go to the time remap attribute, hold down Alt, and click on its stopwatch. Now, what we're going to be doing here is going to be referencing the time remap of the lead layer, so you're probably going to want to pull that open as well. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to say for copy layer, pick whip to the time remap of the layer above it. So it's going to be whatever time you were layer above dot value capital A at capital T time, and then basically we're saying take the value that it was at a different time, and that time is in brackets time minus, and then in brackets again index minus 1 multiplied by the time offset, so you can pick whip up to that again and then close out those brackets. So as you change the time offset, that'll change how many frames, or in this case how many seconds or parts of a second things are away from each other. So if you want to offset them by 1 frame, you can go 0.04 because we are currently using 25 frames a second. 0.04 should satisfy that. I think we've pretty much got it covered. The next thing you have to do, and this is pretty much the last one, is duplicate the copy layer as many times as you'd like. So we just go duplicate, 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 just a whole bunch of them. And you can do this as many times as you want for about as much rendering razzmatazz as you care to suffer through. And you can see that it's creating these cutouts going back in time, and almost away to infinity. So do as many of them as you want, or as many as you think you need, and that's all good. So you can see it kind of makes these motiony ghost trails behind things. And this is something I ripped off of an amazing artist who did this all by hand. Basically, he animated things just like we did with the clean animation. Then he took those, printed out on cardstock, cut it out, and then photographed them all on top of each other. Now, this is just a way to do that in post because, quite frankly, I don't have the studio space or general interest to sit through such a thing, but hopefully this has shown you some interesting things and you've learned some fun stuff about time remapping and all that jazz. If you want some textures, you can get them from me at a link somewhere in the description or on here. And yeah, hopefully this has been fun and unique and different. I guess one last thing before we go is make sure you rename your layers correctly. This is animation stack. And then if you want to do things like add some color correction or whatever to this, then you would just put it into its own composition, add an adjustment layer, you know, give it things like a tritone perhaps, and then maybe give it things like a curves adjustment, you know, stick that on there, give it a cross process of some kind, cap it off with a tint to just bring that craziness down a little bit, maybe make a new solid and put a vignette on there in some capacity, you know, just because vignettes look cool kind of thing. And there you go. So that's how you would style it up. Anyway, I'm Evan Abrams. Hopefully this has helped. If you get stuck anywhere, just go back and watch it through slowly. I'm going to try to post up this project file, and hopefully it helps get you going in the right direction. It is a little bit complicated, but if you can't do it, just remember the only things that you have to change on the project file are the clean animation to animate whatever you want to put in there, and then alter the things on the control layer to, you know, change how far apart things are in time. Like, okay, check this out. 0.04, jack it up to 0.08, suddenly your trail got twice as long and things are spaced out a little bit more. So that's about it for how that changes. And you can even use fractions of a second, right? So I can use 0.01 if I want, because After Effects actually has the information for in-between frames. So don't feel like you're stuck with things as they are. Play around with numbers, play around with values, just break the shit out of all the expressions I've taken a lot of time to carefully craft, and hopefully this is helpful for you. So I'm Evan Abrams. Subscribe to the channel, comment, rate, subscribe. There's going to be new stuff here all the time, and in fact, new stuff every week except when I miss a week because of whatever. So thanks for coming to the channel, and I'll see you around the internet. Hit me up on the Facebook and Twitter, and we will jam about After Effects. Goodbye, and thanks for watching.